Hey, are you here? Mm-hmm. I know you're here. All right, let's begin this episode of the Paul Leslie Hour. This time around, Paul E. Leslie interviews Jody Jackson. Now, Jody's the executive director of the Jarrard Burch Foundation. More directly, you could say that Mr. Jody Jackson is keeping the legacy of the late songwriters John Jarrard and Bruce Birch alive. As the foundation puts it, live the song, love the music, lead the cause. This year's annual Songwriters Show of the Jarrard Burch Foundation is coming up on Saturday, September 10th, 2022 at 6 p.m. And you know Paul will be there at 908 Grove Street in Gainesville, Georgia. It'll be an unforgettable night of storytelling and entertainment. No matter where you are, you'll want to make this one for sure. Hey, can you help us out? Help the Paul Leslie Hour? You're already helping just by tuning in and listening. But if you like what you hear, you can also choose to go to www.thepaulleslie.com/support. You can go there. You can go there. You can go there. I think it's time for Jody Jackson. Paul, I think that's your cue. Let's start the show, right?
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Paul Leslie Hour. I am very honored to have Jody Jackson with me. Jody Jackson is the executive director of the Jarrard Burch Foundation, formerly known just as the John Jarrard Foundation. He's got a long history in the entertainment and live events business. He has worked with artists pretty much his whole life. People like Shania Twain, Toby Keith, a long stretch with the great T. Graham Brown, something like 14 years, I think. And he is the executive director of the Jarrard Burch Foundation. They are having their signature concert like they do every single September. And I don't know how these guys do it, but it is the best concert of the year. The first time I went to one, I was mad at myself, and I always told the late Bruce Birch this. I was mad at myself that I hadn't gone to one sooner. So, Jody Jackson, thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thanks for having me, Paul. The interview you did with Bruce 10 or 12 years ago, maybe 8 or 10 years ago, we still keep because it's just so special to hear what everything meant to Bruce and to, the foundation and to his kids, his grandkids, his music. It's a special interview, and we've kept it forever and played it for people to kind of just hear in Bruce's words, his life and music.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. So we want to get kind of a bit of your background. Where do you call home?
I call home Atlanta, Georgia now. I was born in downtown Atlanta, Piedmont Hospital. Lived in Atlanta for my whole life up until I moved to Nashville. Went to high school at Campbell, Smyrna, which is real close to where the Braves Stadium is now, Windy Hill Road area. And then went to West Georgia College. I went there to play football, but I realized I walked on and Coach Pate, they had won the national championship the year before, and he came out and said, "Hey guys, we've got 80 walk-ons and we're going to be able to keep 6 or 7 of you." So that was my last day of football practice. I hung the pads up and started working at the radio station in West Georgia. My family have a long history. You probably didn't see all that or have heard of the music business and radio business. My older brother was a vice president of several record labels in Atlanta, Nashville, LA. My brother-in-law at the time when I was in college was a radio consultant and for album-oriented rock with Burkhart Abrams. And so anyway, I just kind of was around the whole radio thing early on and did that throughout college and got out of college and went straight to 96 Rock, did an internship there. Then they hired me And then I found out about a job opening at Y106, the country station in Atlanta. And I went there, interviewed to be a promotions assistant, and they hired me. And I didn't know anything about country music at the time, other than, Waylon and Willie and Hank Jr. and a few things like that. But that's where I met Bruce. I'd been there about a year, I guess. This was 90, 91. And we did an in-store at a Turtles Records and Tapes at Acres Mill Road, which is right across the street from the radio station, for Sawyer Brown, for a new Sawyer Brown record. And I was setting up, the live broadcast and the banners and everything. And Rhubarb introduced me to this fellow by the name of Bruce Birch. And he said, Bruce is from Gainesville, Georgia. He lives in Nashville. And he's just had either his first or second Reba McEntire #1 song. And, I was just in awe. Hey, man. And he was just the nicest guy of everybody I met, with Mark Miller and Sawyer Brown and all of them. Bruce was just by far the coolest guy. We all went to lunch after that and kind of went on from there. I stayed at Y106 for 4 years. They moved me to promotion director. I was the youngest promotion director in Atlanta at the time. And we had just started beating kicks every book. And it was just a great time for Atlanta radio. When I decided to finally get out of that, I was checking with everybody in Nashville. My brother, he was vice president of RCA in LA, Rock, and he moved to Nashville and started doing club promotion it's right when Boot Scoot Boogie and Achy Breaky Heart and all that kind of country dance stuff came out. So I moved to Nashville to work with my brother. And when I got in town, I called, I had 6 or 8 people that I'd known over the years in country promotions or whatever in Nashville. And I called Bruce Birch and I said, hey, you remember me? It's Jody. Oh, yeah. I said, I'd just love to catch up with you sometime and go to lunch. This was at 11 a.m. He said, how about 12 o'clock at the pizza place down there by Vanderbilt? I was like, absolutely. So I met him there. And we just hit it off. I mean, our wives did, our friend. I mean, he's just an amazing guy. And then I still did promotions for 2 more years with my brother. And then Bruce called me one day and said, hey, with Country Club Promotion, we started Shania Twain and the triple play thing with Toby Keith and Shania and John Brennan. I worked with a few different artists, Travis Tritt and, John Barry, artists that I knew from Atlanta or from Georgia. And Bruce called me one day, said, hey, man, T. Graham needs a guy just to go out on the road, maybe, for 6 months or a year and do his, road management and all the stuff, radio and, all the stuff you do. And I thought, well, sure, I'll try that, for a little while. And 14 years later, I got off the tour bus. So it was a crazy ride. Bruce came out with us a lot and they wrote together. Of course, they wrote Wine into Water, out on the road. And so I did that for a while. And then Bruce had moved back to Georgia, to Athens, to start the University of Georgia Music Business Program, which is really doing well now. And he called me again. He said, the John Jarrard Foundation? And I was like, yeah, I'd been to a couple of shows with T. Graham, and I brought Alex Harvey, who wrote Delta Dawn, and a few other writers. I'd come down to the show, and this thing was just growing. It went from 30 tables to now we have 110 tables every show. So anyway, he said, they need somebody to kind of run this. Well, my mother was living in Marietta and had begun Alzheimer's. So she was kind of losing her mind. And I thought, it's probably a good time to get back to Georgia. My kids were still like middle school, not old enough to really make a difference on a move. So moved back down here and started doing the John Jarrard Show, which now we're in our 21st year, now the Jarrard Burch, but we'll talk about that later. But with all that, I met so many people, and I'm not kidding. 70% of everybody I met who was anybody was through Bruce Birch, because everybody loved him in Nashville. He's just a good guy, just a regular guy. There's no ego. He'd always call you back, So, coming back to Georgia, there's people like the Georgia Association of Community Hospitals that I do events for, the Georgia Poultry Federation, which is based out of Gainesville. And I just do their booking, their stage, sound and lights, and all the, everything that goes around the concert. And then Bruce and I did several projects together. We started Cletus T. Judd. That was 10 years before all this. He moved to town because Bruce had met him at the buckboard, and he was Barry Poole, just doing goofy stuff. And he lived on Bruce's couch for a while until Bruce's wife kicked him out, and then he lived on my couch for a while until my wife kicked him out. But we gave him the name Cletus T, and the rest is history on his country parody stuff. But we did a few other things together, and then Bruce went from Athens to Kennesaw and started a music business program there, the Joel Katz program, which is doing great. Then he ended up coming back to Gainesville about 5-6 years ago, and doing a music, not a program, but classes where students could learn about the music business. And he just touched so many kids that are interested in music. And these are kids that didn't play basketball or football or baseball. They were into music, but where do you go with that if you don't know how the music business is ran? So he just touched a lot of people. And then he ended up moving a few years ago back to Nashville, where his grandkids are, which was a great move on his part. And then I've just continued to do these shows for the John Jarrard Show, and I do a couple other songwriter shows. I do one in Valdosta a couple times a year. I do one in Thomasville, Georgia, and other events like that.
Now, I've been to a few of them, not anywhere close to you in terms of number, but I have so many vivid memories of seeing, there were a few times where I thought, I don't even like this song, but in the hands of the writer, it's like, wow, I didn't even know this song was a knockout. Do you have I know it's hard with year after year of these shows. Do you have a favorite memory from the annual concert?
Honestly, I've got several, but our 10th anniversary, through T. Graham, I got to know Steve Cropper. Steve Cropper has the greatest music stories ever. He's from Arkansas, but grew up in Memphis, or moved to Memphis for Stax Records. And he was with Booker T and the MGs. And then they found Otis Redding. Otis Redding was driving a van for the studio there. And anyway, long story, our 10th anniversary, I had Steve Cropper and Jimmy Hall, who I know very well from up there, great singer, and Gary Nicholson, who's an amazing songwriter. Gary's actually getting inducted in the Songwriter Hall of Fame this October 30th. Had them down. I can't remember who else was on the show, 2 or 3 other songwriters. So we did our regular in the round, the stories, just like a Bluebird Cafe, like we always do. And at the end, we brought Steve Cropper up, and we had some percussion and a bass player, and played, in the Midnight Hour and 634 and Dock of the Bay and Soul Man, and everybody got up from their table and was just dancing, to end the show on those 5 or 6 huge soul hits from Memphis, So that's probably my favorite. But every one of them have been good. And in fact, last year, our 20th, we had Matresa Bird, who's the youngest female ever in the Songwriter Hall of Fame. She wrote Strawberry Wine and UN Tequila and a bunch of great hits, with Jim Collins, who Jim's one of my favorite songwriters. He just had another #1 with Damn Straight. So now I call him Damn Jim. That's another story. He was great. And he said, I've just got these tractor songs, because he wrote She Thinks My Tractor's Sexy, and the other Jason Aldean.
Green tractor.
There you go. Big green tractor. Yeah.
Yeah, you got it. So
he was on the show last year. And then we had Dean Dillon, who I've never met Dean Dillon until he came into town last October. And 40 to 50 #1 George Straits, stories behind every one of them, how he sent them to Strait, and when he played, it was just, so that was another very, very special John Jarrard concert.
Yeah, that was just phenomenal. It was just such a great show. I still think about certain moments of that show. It was just phenomenal. And I hope people out there that are watching or listening, they consider coming to this one, even if it means getting in the car for 5 hours like I'm going to do. It's worth it. And so tell us about who is going to be performing on September 10th, 2022 in Gainesville.
A special thing for this one, because we've changed the name now to Jarrard Burch Foundation for obvious reasons. Bruce is the whole reason that this thing took off after John passed away. He was the connection for me, for the songwriters, for the city of Gainesville, for everybody. He was kind of the glue that got it all going. So Bruce and I, in the last, I'd say, 6 or 7 years, we would get together and just start going through songwriters. We try not to duplicate a lot, although, we've had Tony Arata a lot just because he's just a great guy with one of the best songs ever. We've had Greg Barnhill a lot. He's had a lot of hits and sings great. These are just really cool, friendly guys that are easy to call up and say, come play. But we've tried not to duplicate. So we'll sit down and just go over a bunch of different writers. So this year, and Bruce and I actually were talking about it, a month or two before he passed away, which was March the 12th. Stephanie Smith, who we've never had. And I've met her at a couple of Songwriter Festivals down at 30A, and she's just incredible. She's just a good person with a lot of hits, but she wrote It's Your Love for Tim McGraw and Faith Hill. She wrote Johnny and June, which was a big hit and a great song, and a couple others, and she's just wonderful. Never had her. And we've got Jeff Stevens, I really got Jeff. We had him about 5 or 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago down here, but he is a huge Bruce Birch fan. Jeff had 2 huge number ones for George Strait, Carrying Your Love With Me, and I Get Carried Away. Don't get me singing here. But anyway, Paul. And then he wrote some of the Luke Bryan hits because he produced Luke Bryan. So we got Jeff Stevens coming. And then we have one of my favorite guys in all of songwriters, Chuck Cannon. And I got to know Chuck over 10 years ago at a couple of things I did, probably 15 years ago with T. Graham and Bruce and everybody. And actually, Chuck did one of probably the last show John Jarrard did before he went in the hospital and passed away. So we've had Chuck at some of our smaller events. I've had him in other corporate things that I've booked, but we've never had him at the John Jarrard show. And Chuck, of course, wrote Love the Way You Love Me, which is one of the most played songs at every wedding in America. And he wrote several of the Toby Keith hits, How Do You Like Me Now, and The American Soldier. And Chuck's just funny, and he's just a good guy. He was married to Laurie White, and she passed away maybe 3 or 4 years ago. So anyway, Chuck finally was able, he's on the West Coast on like Thursday or Friday before he's flying all the way to do it. So with those 3, and then we still got 3 weeks. So I'm thinking we're going to add one more. I've got a few calls out there, maybe a younger writer who's had a few hits. But even if we don't add anybody, this show will be fantastic. I mean, there'll be 12 to 15 number ones, and the whole show is usually about 20 to 25 songs. So it'll be great. But we'll see. I should know here in the next week if we're going to add, another writer. And then we do an opening round where we have local writers, which we had Corey Crowder, who's had a bunch of hits now. He was on our opening round. We had Ray Fulcher is his name. And Ray is from kind of the Athens, Georgia area. And Bruce said, 6 or 8 years ago, Ray was sending Bruce all these songs, hey, can you get me help cut? And Bruce like, I didn't hear anything that blew me away. Well, now he's having big number ones with Luke Combs and all that. So we've had Ray on our opening round, and we'll have him back on the big show. And so it's just a beautiful night. It's hard to explain. And Dallas Davidson probably said it better than anybody. He said, the John Jarrard Foundation has it down. And it's not because of me. It's more because of Bruce, and it's also because of our board. We have a strong 27, 28 person board who are all very tied into North Georgia. I don't know if they're lawyers, bankers, whatever they do, they know people that'll buy tables, support it. We have an auction, and they're hard at work. And so it's a whole army to put this thing together. It's literally about 1,000 people at candlelit tables. And it's just like going to the Bluebird. You sit there and you hear the stories, and you're drinking wine or whatever you drink, and great food. And it's just a 2 to 3 hour show that people just love. If the weather's good, I've had people in Gainesville say, my wife and I, this is our favorite event of the year, is to come to the John Jarrard and hear these stories. And really, people are good because these kind of things, they're very intimate. So you want everybody to be quiet, but you walk a fine line of telling people to shut up, because then it gets ugly because they're drinking with friends. But I think over the years, people have learned there are places you can go, drink and talk and smoke, and then you come back to your table and you sit and listen, and it's just a wonderful event.
That's right. Yeah, and it is. It's something that I think, you know, uh, it's more than just, there's something about it. It's more than just here are a bunch of songwriters singing their songs, many of which are famous. There is this ability. I see people there that are 15, 16, and they seem like they're having a fantastic song. And then there are people that are in their 70s, 80s, and older. And that's just amazing to me.
It's a universal language, and to me, when you get our age, I won't say any numbers, but when you get in your 40s and 50s and 60s, you don't want to go out where it's loud and crowds and all, but to sit and listen to a song that you may or may not know. It helps if you know it, obviously, but hear the story behind it, how it was written, and all that, and people they just love that whole concept, and it shows because they're growing everywhere. There used to just be like the 38 songwriter, the Key West, and the Frank Brown is probably the original one. Now they're popping up there. I bet you I could name 20 songwriter festivals, and they raise money for different charities, which is great. Ours just happens to be, the Boys and Girls Club, the Good News Clinics, and the Good News Shelter, which were all very dear to John Jarrard. So over the last 20 years, we've raised right at $2 million, and we, try to keep it in the community. Keep, the toughest part, honestly, Paul, is that every year I hear that's the best one ever. That's the best. I mean, we've raised the bar so high with these shows or the artists, the songwriters have, that sometimes I worry people are going to go, this wasn't near as good as last year or something like
Hmm.
that. But it's always a good time for people to hang out and for a good cause.
Well, last year I was thinking, man, it's going to be hard to top this one with Dean Dillon and all that you talked about. But then today I was at the gym and I was listening to "Carrying Your Love with Me,"
Yeah,
the George Strait song, and I thought, man, this it's one of the most famous George Strait songs, and I thought
it
I
is.
cannot wait to hear the guy who wrote that. I said,
Yeah,
I don't know, this one might be,
yeah,
you know.
exactly.
Can you tell the people out there? You spoke a lot about Bruce Birch. What does he mean to you personally?
I don't know if I can do that well. Emotional. When he passed away, we had a memorial service for him in Nashville. It was absolutely beautiful. And T. Graham and T.G. Shepherd and Red Ake. A lot of people came out and spoke or sang. And then we did one in Gainesville, Georgia for him, where a lot of his high school friends and family and all that. And he made an impact. And that was when I spoke in Gainesville, I was like, I've never met somebody who makes such an impact on people. And when I say that, he's like he's out to help you. Like, what do you need? And I'll make a call for you, or I'll try to. And that's unheard of in this business. I mean, there are some people who do, but for the most part, you can't get arrested in Nashville with a good song or a good singer or a good drum. It's just tough to do. And Bruce he would meet somebody, and I'm telling you, I went to high school with the Blackberry Smoke guys, Richard and Britt Turner. And I didn't know that I'd moved to Nashville for 15 years. I didn't know they had a band going. And all of a sudden it was doing well, locally, and kind of the new Southern rock band, let's say. So I came down here. This is like 2012, maybe 14. I can't remember. But I started talking to Britt Turner, the drummer, and he's like, who helped us is Bruce Birch. He helped us in Nashville more than anybody. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. Then I do an event with the Georgia Music Foundation. I just, donate and help out Lisa Love with that every year at the Ryman. And 2 years ago, Billy Currington was on the show, and I was in his dressing room, and we were just talking. I'd never met Billy, and told him the reason I kind of moved to Nashville was Bruce Birch called me and said, or I'd moved, but I got on with T. Graham, Bruce Birch. He said, oh my God, Bruce Birch. He said, that's the first guy when I moved to Nashville that called me back. He said, I'm from Savannah, Georgia. I moved here, didn't know a soul. And Bruce called me back and met with me, and we had lunch, and he introduced me to some publishing people. It just went on and on. And I'll be damned if after he passed away, Rhett Aiken, he came out to the memorial. And, Rhett from Valdosta, Georgia, had his own record deal for a while and had a hit or two. And then nothing was going on with him. And then all of a sudden he started writing with Dallas and Ben and several people. Well, now he's, I don't even know, 20 to 25 number ones. But you know what he said? Nobody helped me as much as Bruce Birch did when I was in, because he knew, I'm the Georgia fan. I'm from Georgia and met Bruce, and he introduced me to all these people. And I just think he just made an impact on people. When Wayne Newton, Bruce met Wayne Newton through Rhubarb here in Atlanta, and I was working at the station then, and Wayne just fell in love with Bruce. And his next record, he cut 6 Bruce Birch songs. And
Yeah.
I don't know. It's weird how he's just, and Bruce has some songs, and we shared an office together. He played me that still have never gotten cut, never been recorded. I've just heard demos, but they're great songs.
Yeah.
But I think that he cared, and he was serious about trying to help people. And that was his whole reasoning behind at UGA, because he's a Georgia grad, and he knows that, if you play trumpet or drums or guitar, that's obvious what you got to do to get to the next step. But if you want to be a promotion director or road manager or a sound man, or, there's no, now there is, but prior to Bruce and several, people and like Mike Curb in Nashville, at Belmont, that's the word I was trying to think. Belmont has a great program where you go there and learn everything musically. But anyway, so that when he started at Georgia, and these kids to this day, there's some of them who are doing great things in Nashville and New York and LA. And it all came with Bruce's vision of, hey, let's start a music business program where not only musicians, but business people or accountants or whatever that want to be involved in music. So just, not only that's all the business side. The personal side is Bruce is one of these. I'm a very emotional person myself. I mean, I just get I can't watch sad movies or anything like that. And Bruce is the same way. He one of the first Rhubarb Jones, we used to have a golf tournament. Bruce had leukemia. So Rhubarb started this golf tournament we did every year. And I remember one year, Earl Thomas Conley came down and T. Graham and Mark Colley. And we were all sitting in this room. Of course, there was some drinking going on, but Earl was playing some song on the guitar, and everybody just starts crying. And these are grown men, and I know there was alcohol involved, but it was a very sad kind of, or a heavy emotional song. And I just fell in love with him. Like Bruce, another quick story. I was out on the road when I turned 30. We played up in Canada. So my wife at the time was going to have me a surprise birthday party. Well, our flight was severely delayed. Like we missed the flight in Detroit that came out of Canada. So she said that y'all could do anything you want if you'll just stay here. Well, there's like 40 people there. Well, they all left, but maybe 5. Bruce got my underwear, every pair of underwear he could find in my room, and hung it all over the apartment when I got back in town. And when his daughter got married down in St. Simons, we had a great time and did a lot for that. And I don't know, I could go on literally for 2 hours about stuff that Bruce and I did that were great, and some I'm not too proud of, but they're great memories.
Well, I think you really got to the heart of Bruce Birch. Nobody has ever called me on the phone having just heard a song that made him cry more than Bruce Birch. And the very first time I met him, I remember we went and got a coffee. I'd never met this guy in my life, and
Right.
I liked him right away, of course, like everybody. But then we got in his car, and he had this big bin of demos and songs, and we start listening to songs. And here I am, I'm crying with this guy that I just met in this car in Gainesville, Georgia. And that's
Yeah.
Bruce Birch.
That was him. There was no fake to him. There was no ego. And some of the things he did, he rubbed people the wrong way, but he was on a mission for the right thing, for the show or for the event or whatever. but he didn't really have a filter. Like he would say things that he shouldn't say to people 20 minutes before everybody's going on stage, but it was all out of passion. You know, he had a big heart and big passion for the show to be right.
I always like to ask somebody who is either a venue person or a live events guy. Everyone has usually some name in their back pocket. They have a dream to book this person for a festival or for a show. So for Jody Jackson, maybe the first two names that pop into your mind where you think I'd love to have them at the show.
Now I have to ask, alive? They have to be alive now,
They
or
have to be living artists that could one day
living?
potentially
Okay,
play.
okay. Because I would say Greg Allman if it was
Yeah.
not living. Living right now, it would probably be Jackson Brown.
Wow.
Um, no, my favorite were Jackson Brown, Tom Petty, Greg Allman, and Merle Haggard. They're those four right there. Artists that some people may not have heard of before who absolutely blow me away is Paul Thorne. I don't know if you've ever heard of Paul Thorne. He's a
No.
Mississippi guy. Look him up. He's unbelievably good. I've probably gone to see him just to get out of whatever I'm doing to go see a Paul Thorne show 30 or 40 times. But he's another one. I've gotten to know him pretty well, and his manager, Billy. Van Morrison. I'm a huge Van Morrison fan, which I wasn't in, years ago. But as you get older and you're just sitting around listening to stuff, there's nothing better than some of that old Van Morrison. Just the arrangements, the horns, his voice, the songs. But I guess you're asking me for one, aren't you?
Well, that's a good list. And so Jackson Brown, if you're watching or listening, get in touch. How would Jackson Brown or anybody out there, how would they find out about the
Oh,
Jarrard
no, Paul,
Burch?
you didn't tell me. I can't be telling anybody my information. No, I'm kidding. Go to GarrardBurchFoundation.com, and info to that is click on, and I'll look at that when anything comes in. Jay Jackson still at JohnGarrardFoundation.com. I've changed my email address over, but I haven't learned how to put it on my phone yet. So I'm checking 2 emails here till we get through this show, and then I'll go all just to Jody at Jarrard Burch Foundation.
And everybody go to GarrardBurchFoundation.com. You're going to want to be at this show September 10th, 2022.
Absolutely.
So you've gotten to do so many really interesting things and interact with a lot of great people. What is the best thing about being Jody Jackson?
Man, that's tough. I would probably say family. I have a really, really big dysfunctional family, but we're all good people and mean the right. But I have a wonderful daughter who's 26, graduated from college, working in the medical field or trying to get further in the medical field. And I have a son who I spend a lot of time with right now. He's got one more semester of college. And I think, I think they're doing the right things. You never know in this day and time what to tell a 20-year-old to do, but just do the right thing, make a living, get a job that you like, and help people. I would say. So I'm real happy with where I'm still a few years from retirement, but I've kind of honestly lost the rat race. I don't care to own an empire. I spend every day either working or playing golf or, going to ball games. I'm a huge Braves fan. I'm a huge Georgia Bulldog fans, and I have to say they both are champions right now.
Right.
So I just kind of do what I want to do and still, maintain the shows that I have and try to help any way I can, help other people, because I think I do get the biggest, I feel better about helping others than sitting at home and not, whether it's, music or, whatever it may be.
So my last question, if you were to define Jody Jackson, who would you say you are at heart?
I'd say a fun guy. I mean, probably corny at times, but I just like people smiling. And I know sometimes in business or in serious situations, people might go, you got to get serious here. But I'm thinking, I mean, I hate to say it, but what really matters? You know what I'm saying? If you can't laugh, everybody's going through all these problems. Everybody has money issues. They have family issues. Everybody's going to die. Nobody's getting out alive. So it's like, do the best you can and do right for people, and it'll all work out in the wash.
Well, Jody Jackson, thank you so much for making the time. It's been great to do this interview.
Thank you, Paul. I do want to interject something. I don't know if you can edit it or if we're live on national television, but we have started at the University of Georgia a music business program scholarship. It's the Birch Fund. So you can go on our website or look it up, Google it. And it's just started. We just started about a month ago, and we've had some great people who've donated a lot of money already. And this was Bruce's vision, is to help these kids learn music and learn the music business. And this fund, what it's going to do, because it's at the University of Georgia, where I think 98% of the kids there are on the Hope Scholarship. So their college is getting paid for. But this is a fund so kids can go to Austin for a semester, or go to LA, or go to New York, or go to Nashville, and it pays their rent or their traveling expenses. That's specifically what it's for. So anybody out there listening, if you can give $5 or $500 or whatever, it would mean a lot to us at the Jarrard Burch Foundation.
That's a wonderful thing, and we'll post the links below. So, Jody, sir, thank you so much. A great pleasure.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing you. Let me know what you need, tickets, tables. We'll send an airplane after you if we need to, but just do show up. It's going to be a great event, and I appreciate you having me on, Paul.
Yes, sir. See you September 10th, 2022, Gainesville, Georgia. I won't miss it.
All right, buddy. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
The Paul Leslie Hour is made possible by people like you, listeners, viewers. Please go to thepaulleslie.com/support, and you'll know what to do when you're there. Thank you. Thank you, everyone who contributes. Performance of The Entertainer intro song by John Primorano. And of course, this is your announcer speaking. See you next time on the Paul Leslie Hour.